Can I sit here? The little girl asked quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the noise of the busy diner. She stood near the window booth where a single father was sitting with his coffee gone cold and a half-eaten plate of fries in front of him, his eyes tired like someone who had been fighting invisible battles for too long. The man looked up, expecting maybe a waitress or a rushed customer, but instead saw a small child no older than 8, holding a worn backpack too big for her fragile shoulders and standing on only one leg, the other replaced by a simple, scratched metal crutch. For a moment he didn't answer, not because he was unkind, but because something about her question felt heavier than it should have. "Is anyone sitting there?" she asked again, glancing at the empty seat across from him. He shook his head slowly. "No, it's just me." She nodded and carefully lowered herself onto the booth, adjusting her crutch beside her, like it was part of her body, like she had learned long ago not to expect help from anyone. The father noticed how she tried to sit without drawing attention, how her eyes kept flicking toward the exit, as if she might be asked to leave at any moment. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then gave a small shrug that didn't quite hide the truth. "I'm waiting for my mom. She works nearby. I just didn't want to stand outside alone." Something in her voice cracked the quiet armor around his heart. He had a daughter too somewhere across the city, living with her mother after the divorce. And suddenly this stranger's child felt painfully familiar. The diner hummed around them, plates clinking, people laughing, life moving fast as always. But in that booth time slowed down. The man noticed small details now. Her shoes were slightly torn, her backpack had a broken zipper, and her hands were carefully folded like she had been taught to make herself small in the world. He called the waitress over and ordered her a warm meal without asking her permission first. When the food arrived, the girl stared at it like it was something she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can eat." She shook her head immediately. "I can't. I don't have money." The words came out automatic, like she had said them many times before in many places. The man felt something twist inside him. "This one's on me," he said simply. Still, she didn't move. Instead, she asked something that broke him in a way he didn't expect. "Why would you do that for me?" He didn't have a grand answer, no speech ready, no philosophy, just honesty. "Because I think you've had a hard day, and no one should be alone when they're having a hard day." That was it. Nothing dramatic, just human. The girl blinked quickly, looking down at the table as if trying to stop something from escaping her eyes. She finally picked up the spoon, hesitated, then took a small bite, and then another, and another, like her body had been, waiting longer than her pride. As she ate, she started talking slowly, pieces of her life falling out like fragile glass. How she lost her leg in an accident when she was younger. How her mother worked double shifts cleaning offices downtown. How kids at school sometimes stared too long or whispered too loudly. How she had learned to pretend she was okay because people didn't like sadness lingering too long. The man listened without interrupting, his own pain shrinking in comparison, not because it disappeared, but because it found company. When she finished eating, she finally smiled, a small, uncertain smile that looked like it hadn't been used in a while. She thanked him and reached for her backpack. But as she turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The man stood up too. "Wait," he said, surprising even himself. He reached into his wallet, hesitated for only a second, then pulled out something more valuable than money, a folded card with a phone number and a business logo. "I run a small foundation," he said. It wasn't entirely true, not yet, not officially, but it was becoming true in that moment. "We help kids who need prosthetics, school support, things like that." Her eyes widened slightly. "Why?" she asked again, softer this time. He looked at her crutch, then at her face. "Because I think you shouldn't have to fight this world alone either." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of possibility, full of something neither of them had names for. Months passed in what felt like a blur of paperwork, hospital visits, and uncertain hope. The man didn't forget her. In fact, she became the reason he started rebuilding his life after his divorce. The reason he stopped drinking alone at night. The reason he believed again that broken things could still be repaired. And the girl, she began to change too. She got fitted with a proper prosthetic through the foundation support. She returned to school with a steadier step and a quieter confidence. But the most important change wasn't visible. It was the way she no longer looked at the ground when she entered a room. One afternoon, nearly a year later, she returned to the same diner, the same booth, the same window. This time, she wasn't alone. She walked in, holding a small bouquet of flowers and a folded drawing she had made in school. When the man saw her, he almost didn't recognize her at first, not because she had changed physically, but because she looked like someone who had been given back her place in the world. "Can I sit here?" she asked again, smiling this time. He laughed softly, his eyes suddenly wet. "Always." She handed him the drawing. It was simple, a stick figure girl with a strong metal leg standing beside a tall man, holding a small umbrella over her. Above it, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "You didn't fix my leg. You fixed my life." The man couldn't speak. He didn't need to. In that quiet diner booth, surrounded by strangers who had no idea what was happening, two lives folded into a moment that neither of them would ever forget. And as the sun poured through the window, warm and golden, it felt like the world had finally decided to be a little kinder than it used to be.